Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Ozymandias Project. Trireme Transit, the newest and most reliable state-of-the-art time-traveling transportation service, is now boarding for all new and returning passengers. Now departing, present ponderings. Next stop is Ancient Odyssey.
Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of the podcast. I was so excited to be able to chat with my friend Aristotle Koskinas. Aristotle is an archaeologist and tour guide based in Athens, Greece. I actually met him while studying abroad during the summer of 2014, right after completing my freshman year of undergrad. Not only is he one of the most knowledgeable people in all of Greece, he also happens to love Greek mythology and architecture as much as I do. He is also a huge Star Wars fan and an avid blogger. I even inspired him to write a blog post comparing Greek locations to Star Wars cities and planets a few years ago. After COVID-19, should you find yourself wanting to travel to Greece, I know that he would love to meet some of you and show you around the Acropolis or one of the many other sites. So enjoy this episode, and I'll talk to you next time. So, Aristotle, I know you're an archaeologist as well as a tour guide. So, can you tell me a little bit about the benefits to maybe, being both in your line of work?
So, the benefits. Well, as a tourist guide, you have to take people to archaeological sites and museums, not only to those areas of interest, but primarily to archaeological sites. So, and although training for tourist guides in Greece used to be of a very, very high standard and very high level, and in the School of Tourist Guides, we got a lot of knowledge, and we travel all around Greece. But my experience as an archaeologist and also as a field archaeologist helped me a lot to give a more thorough interpretation of the sites. I can embellish the sites with stories about what was going on in that specific area, how artifacts were used. Sometimes in museums there are artifacts that they don't even have a caption, but I can explain them to my audience, because I know from my studies on archaeology what those objects were supposed to be, or what we think they were used for. And also, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I think that being an archaeologist makes me more passionate about describing the archaeological sites, because I think that this way I'm doing some kind of public outreach. And I try to make people be really interested about the sites and the artifacts and their history.
Yeah, no, I think that's really cool because, most tour guides that you'll take a tour with or see or meet in any country, not just Greece, they're only the tour guide. And I think that it's really easy to sort of learn whatever the manual or the book tells you, and then to sort of just regurgitate it in whatever order they kind of see fit. So I know that when I took many tours during our study abroad together, I really enjoyed the extra archaeological angle. And I think that it's a handy skill that more people should. I guess, I don't know, maybe I'm biased, but, I would love it if every tour guide were an archaeologist. What are some of the, steps you went through to sort of get to where you are now? What did you start with wanting to be a tour guide, or did you start with wanting to be an archaeologist?
Well, actually, I started wanted to be an archaeologist. Although, to be honest, I wanted to be a career military officer. Now, how I jumped from that to want to become an archaeologist is a big story. But I decided that I wanted to become an archaeologist when I was about 16 years old. And I went to a special high school, was preparing you for humanities and classics, skipping all the other stuff, physics and chemistry and mathematics. And I knew that professionally, getting employment was not that easy. that didn't deter me from one study archaeology. And that's why anyway, I worked also for the Ministry of Culture for a few years on a contract basis, but for various reasons. One was that, probably the most important one, that I was in the Ministry of Culture, especially in my last project, I was doing more administration than archaeology. And maybe I was a little disillusioned about the serving in the Ministry of Culture after that. So I decided to try the next best thing. It was guiding. You can say that is the more commercial aspect of the cultural heritage, because you're using the antiquities as a resource, both to create revenue, but why not also to teach people about these places.
Yeah, and so, that's I would say, I think a lot of people that I've met, they've always loved archaeology, but they're, a little unsure whether, I don't know if it's a smart investment to go into that. I think I'd rather be something else. And then, one way or another, either they kind of circle back and they're like, I don't know, I'm going to do this, or they actually do something else and then maybe are kind of like a lifelong hobbyist. So it's really fun to see, people who did decide, okay, whatever, I'm going to do it. And it doesn't matter. Let's see where it leads. And so obviously it led you through archaeological school. And so I know you love roof tiles, so please tell me why.
Yes, I do.
It's a very niche thing, and you're the only person
is.
I've ever met who wants to study them. So yes, please tell me more about that.
So the roof tiles is a type of material culture, roofing material, which are rather crude when you look at them. They're bulky and large. The plain roof tiles that I am studying don't have a lot of decoration, so they're not art. They don't fall under the umbrella of art history, and it's difficult, first of all, to date them and create some kind of typology for them. And typology is something that the archaeologists, it's our main tool for dating artifacts. And when I started studying roof tiles, I was back in the 90s. There were a lot of archaeologists who were studying architectural terracottas, which are the decorated elements of the roof. There are plenty of those, but there were very few who were studying the plain roof tiles. I think back then we must have been, maybe you could count us in the fingers of one hand. Anyway, maybe I'm exaggerating, but you understand. And the bibliography was very limited. Actually, when I was preparing publication for the roof tiles from a survey, that was back in 97, I could fit all the bibliography in a folder which was as thick as a shoebox. That was the entire bibliography that I could find on the subject. Now, of course, after 20 plus years, things have changed for the better, I might say. There are more excavations published the roof tiles, even the plain ones, and we have more data. And also there are a lot of archaeologists, young archaeologists who study this kind of material. They write dissertations about them and papers. And I'm very happy about that. Now, the roof tiles themselves are for me, are fascinating. And I know maybe you won't have it. You're not going to say in photographs or video, no, because I could show you roof tiles, but because they tell you a lot about not only the architecture of building, they can tell you about give you a lot of information about the settlement pattern of an entire region. Because when you find them in the surface survey, you can learn things about trades, transmission of ideas and technologies. If you are lucky and you find stamps, you can learn about the pattern of trades. You can learn about the authorities of the Greek city-state. Sometimes you can find the name of the city-state because it is stamped on the roof tile. So, you can see prints from the paws of animals. So again, I was never like to have that kind of find. But it's for me it's a fascinating subject.
Yeah, and I remember kind of thinking, oh, well, there's certain places where I swear, you walk anywhere and you just step on a roof tile. You'll find like a random one. And you're like, what? What is this? And so I just remember it becoming sort of like a running joke that when I was in Greece, if we found any kind of roof tile, and then even when I was visiting Italy, if I found any roof tile, I said, oh, got to send this to Aristotle. I mean, I don't know what to do with this, but he'll love it. So it's just I think it's a really fun, cool topic that, you can kind of bring up to anyone, and, you'll give the archaeologist hot take, and you'll just be like, roof tiles, they're awesome, and then everyone goes, wait, what? And then I would find that really funny to be able to explain your love for them. So I don't know what it's like in Greece. Obviously it's a smaller country than the US, and you do have like immediate access to all these archaeological sites that we don't. But how hard or easy is it to go to school for something like classics or archaeology? Because here we have such an advertising problem where people just don't know it exists as a discipline. So it just makes it really hard for anyone to actively be able to say, I'm going to go in and study this. Is it easier in Greece?
Well, in Greece, I would say that it is very easy. Actually, that is extremely easy to study archaeology. First of all, there are 25 universities in Greece which are public, so tuition is for free. Talking about the logistics of the thing, and there are 6 schools of archaeology in these universities. So you have in every region of Greece there is a school of archaeology and history. So if someone wants to study archaeology, there are a lot of options. Of course, there is an issue with how you are admitted into a university, because you have to go through a system of general exams, and depending on the marks you have, you may end up in a university which was not your first choice. So if you know from the beginning that I want to go to the University of Thessaloniki because I want to study Neolithic culture, you may end up in the University of Athens, where they have professors who are good in classical archaeology or Bronze Age archaeology, but not in the Neolithic. When I gave those exams, I wanted to go to the University of Thessaloniki in northern Greece, because I wanted to study about the history and archaeology of ancient Macedonia. Maybe it was an influence of all these fabulous finds from Macedonian royal tombs. But I ended up at the University of Yanina, which is in northwestern Greece. So, again, I studied archaeology, but in a more generic aspect. I didn't focus my studies on what I wanted initially. I took another.
Okay, so it seems like it's a really unique sort of system then, unlike here where, okay, well, it's available, just sort of take an exam, but then it seems like you don't get to actually decide sort of where you go.
You can decide. Look, you have options, because there is usually, at least that was the system when I studied. But I think it's similar today. Before you take the exams, there is a form, and you list your preferences. So, and the way that you list your preferences may be significant. But also, if you don't want to go to the university in which you have been admitted to, you can go through the exams again, and maybe you're successful and go eventually to the university that you wanted. So, to sum it up about studying archaeology in Greece, studying archaeology is easy. I mean, getting to a university. In my class, we were 200 students in the class that year, which means actually every year our university was admitting 200 students in the Department of Archaeology, which is a large number. And it because you have to multiply it by 6. Imagine how many people in Greece graduate having a degree in archaeology. And okay, of these, I would say less than 50% were really interested in archaeology. They wanted to study archaeology to have a degree so they could work in public education or whatever. But you could see how many people really want to do archaeology, because they would try to have access to excavations, to university excavations. They would participate in university excavations. You would see them every day in the library of the university studying. So yes, it was. It is accessible. It is easy to get to study archaeology in Greece. There are a lot of excavations in which you can participate. What happens after you graduate is a different.
It always is. Yeah, it always is a different story once you've got the degree. And okay, so I think it's kind of incredible. You had 200 some people in your class, where here, my department at the University of Missouri was really small. I mean, we had maybe 50 people-ish, somewhere, probably less. And most friends of mine who did study any, kind of archaeology or ancient discipline, also their department was just really small. So, it's small enough that everyone, or at least of them, if not them personally. So it is kind of incredible that your class was so big, and I wish we could have programs that big here. Who knows if that'll happen. But, obviously Greece is good for, it's got the sites and archaeology. It's just a great place to study that. What about for some of the other ancient disciplines? Because here in the US, to study Egyptology or Assyriology, it's kind of so exclusive and elite that you have to go to UCLA or Brown or Harvard or somewhere that just kind of is lucky enough to have a program. But, they don't really advertise, and most schools don't really have it. So what if you wanted to study something else? Is that easier in Greece?
Oh, as far as I know, it is not. You have to, some professors may offer a course on Egyptology or Hittite language and script, but you have to study abroad to get a degree and to specialize or have a master's or a thesis or a PhD on those disciplines. So yeah, because these are considered rather exotic, or although the Egyptians and the Mycenaeans had relations, so to understand the place of the Mycenaeans in the world of the Bronze Age, you also have to study the Egyptians. And I know of people who have studied Egyptology, but they started with the course here in Greece, and they ended up studying in England or in the US to get that specialization.
It's so interesting how, it's, depending on what country you're in or where you are, you might have, better availability for programs. So it almost seems, it's, I'm not saying one's better than the other, but it's so interesting how, in Greece, you're like, oh, majoring in archaeology, big department, it's great, something we love to see. And then same thing is here, though, you want to study one of the other sort of exotic fields, and again, you're pushed into, you have to go abroad, or you have to come to the US. You can't really do it there, even though you're a lot closer to some of these other places than we are. So it's very interesting to see just kind of how and where these programs are dispersed. So I've no doubt it's hard for a student who wants to be an Egyptologist or Assyriologist anywhere in the world at this point, except maybe in Egypt or the Middle East.
Because that's closer to their country. So every country definitely has developed the studies on their history and culture. But I know that there are foreign institutes where you can study, even from the US, if you want to study about the Assyrians, there is the Institute of Oriental Studies. If you want to study, to return to Greece. If you want to study about ancient Greece, there is the American School of Classical Studies. And from your university, you can apply they have undergraduate students, they have postgraduate students. You can stay in Greece for a semester or for a full year, and you can have hands-on experience by participating in the excavations of the American School, which are, for example, the excavation of the ancient Agora here in Athens, the excavation of Corinth. Mentioned just two of their projects. So yes, it's I think it's how determined you are. Are you to pursue your studies in archaeology? And there are always ways, because there's not just the American School of Classical Studies. There are a lot of American universities. By American, I also include Canada. We have projects. They're running projects here in Greece for their students. So,
yeah, no, definitely. I think, definitely, if you're passionate and you really know what you want, you're going to be able to find things. So, coming maybe a little back to, say you're someone who doesn't really know what you want, you're not just dead set on, I want archaeology, I want classics, I want whatever. Turning a little to, how do we, if we're thinking about ways to get people interested, and kind of, steer people who might have talent or an interest sort of into any of the fields, what are some ways, that we can do that? Is it through, any kind of pop cultural, sort of, like the Brad Pitt Troy, or, any of the Netflix series or any of the documentaries? Is that how we sort of get them interested? Or are there like better ways, maybe teach them in school younger?
On one hand, pop culture helps a lot to, first of all, because through pop culture you can spread the knowledge about those times and those cultures. And okay, someone who's playing Assassin's Creed Odyssey may get interested of, first of all, visiting the real sites. Okay, someone can visit them through the game, but they can also come over to Greece and visit Delos or Delphi or the Acropolis of Athens to see, to feel for themselves how they really look like. And I think that's a very important step. I know a lot of, because I have guided a lot of people who got interested about Greece by reading the Percy Jackson novels. It's about Greek mythology. They don't take place in Greece, but maybe that makes them even more interesting and engaging for American audience. So yes, pop culture is, I think, is important, but that's just the first step. If someone wants really to study the classics, I think that also so you're right, the educational system has to play its part. Because you play a video game or you read a comic book, you also have to get some more official or formal knowledge about these things to get really interested, to make them to want to become an archaeologist, who want to research, or not just that, or someone who wants to read ancient Greek or Latin texts or inscriptions or Greek philosophy.
Yeah, and I'm so happy that you brought up Assassin's Creed, because I was gonna ask you, are you aware of the newer field of archaeogaming? As one of the few archaeologists I know, I had to ask.
Yeah, archaeogaming. Well, not really. I have watched video. Some young archaeologists who are playing Assassin's Creed Origins. I know that, but I don't know if it's relevant that after Assassin's Creed Odyssey was released, there were a lot of academics who were playing the game, or they were talking about certain aspects of the game, about the architecture, about naval warfare. Maybe it's relevant. So yes, it sounds an interesting field, if it's a new field or a new significant. And actually, I think I was doing archaeogaming before archaeogaming was invented as a thing, because I was always, criticizing video games, and let's focus on the video games, which are related to ancient. And there are plenty of titles of games that are related to ancient Greece and ancient Greek history and ancient Greek mythology. The problem is that being a purist myself, I was always a very strict critic. I was never satisfied with the presentation of antiquity through the games. I'm talking about the games. The games themselves could be great, but I was always finding, that column, Greek temples didn't look like that, or Greek warriors didn't wear helmets like this, or what about the statics, or what is the plot about? What's happening here? So that you listen my 1 hour rant about games, and especially Assassin's Creed. I think it's good to have something like that, where professionals can analyze the way antiquity is presented in video games, because through that, the people who play video games may learn more about the true history, and also understand better the culture in which they're supposed to be playing and interacting with. And hopefully, in the future, creators of similar content will learn to approach antiquity in a more serious way. And by that I mean that, and I strongly believe that you can make antiquity extremely fascinating and interesting if you present it the way it was, and not just embellish it with flourishes and things that are extravagant. Ancient Greece was a very interesting place. And if you want to have content that is full of violence and gore and sex and fabulous architecture and glistening artifacts, ancient Greece had all of that. You can go to a museum and see all that, or read Homer, or read ancient Greek poetry or tragedy. It's everything there. And if you present it as the ancient Greeks presented it, I think they would make it very engaging, even for a modern audience.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because as an avid gamer myself, I do admit, I'm very into especially the ancient games. So Assassin's Creed Origins with ancient Egypt, and then Odyssey with ancient Greece. And I'm also being a sort of purist myself. Yes, I would probably prefer that it be a little closer to, more accurate portrayals. But at the same time, I think it's a great educational tool. Maybe it's not perfect, but I know that, if I was studying Egyptology and I wanted to know, okay, what is a sort of like a peasant house look like back, in, Ptolemaic Egypt, or what does a palace look like? Or, I don't know what, the priests of Amun do at this temple. I think it's a really cool way to be able to say, okay, let's interact with the material by playing the game. So you can literally go stand in the temple. You can talk to a priest on a quest, and he'll tell you a little bit about what he does or what he needs to, perform the rituals. And so it's kind of fun to be sent on a fetch quest. Oh, can you go get me wood? Can you get me the oil? Can you slaughter a bull for me so I can make a sacrifice? So I definitely think it has a place in getting people interested at the surface level, and then once they're kind of like, oh, that's really cool, then that's when we can sort of reel them in and say, okay. But obviously, you're not an educator, you're not a professor, so you're not in the position. But do you, even with it being inaccurate, and I know with Assassin's Creed Odyssey, it has it takes even more liberties, I would say, than Origins did, especially with having a female protagonist. And anyone who knows ancient Greek history would know there weren't really female mercenaries just out there dominating the world. That just wouldn't be a thing. So even with kind of inaccuracies like that, would you still say no? It would be something that you would still advocate for, maybe a professor assigning in a class?
Well, I would, because I think that it would be a great lesson if the students would work and do the research to find out how accurate the game is, how accurate the presentation of a specific site or a temple really is, so they can work on that and really learn. I would never advocate it because actually that happened in Greece when the first promo videos were released. There were a lot of media in Greece and saying, this is a time machine experience, and we should show the videos and the game at schools so Greek students can see how impressive ancient Greece was. And I don't really think that's a time machine experience. I mean, when it comes to a strict archaeological presentation, but if you can use it as a tool in the classroom and give assignments to the students saying, okay, your task is to find out how was the sanctuary of Olympia in the time that the game is supposed to take place, and compare what the archaeologists say and how those things are presented in the game. I think that would be a very interesting experience for the students and the class, because also it's going to be entertaining for the students. Instead of telling me, take this book on ancient Olympia or those 3 books on ancient Olympia, go through them and find how the temple of Olympian Zeus was and what was its decoration and the myth behind it. But if they do that in relation to a game, and if they happen to like the game and play the game, I think that they will find their own personal contact with ancient Greece. So yes, I would be in support of that if it is used in that way, in a critical way, not in just give it saying, okay, this is how ancient Greece was.
Right. So there has to be a degree of critical thinking applied, and knowing that this is not the most accurate portrayal, but it is fun.
Well, yeah, it is fun. For transparency, I have never played the game. I have watched all the promo videos. I have watched a lot of in-game videos on YouTube, but I have never played the game. Friends of mine who have played the game tell me that it was a great game. So, and if students, and by students I mean elementary and high school, if they learn in a funny way, I think they will be more interested about ancient Greece, instead of having someone giving them a lecture. And I have seen that also as a guide in my approach, especially when I'm guiding younger, elementary school students. Instead of talking to them about just standing in front of the statue and talking about the statue itself, I was using the statues as visual backdrops to narrate them a myth. And I was narrating the myth in a dramatic way, changing my voice, engaging students to participate. Okay, so you're going to be Hercules and I'm going to be Triton, and let's fight. And you see that. And I would keep their attention for an hour and a half. Well, usually their attention span is only half an hour. And some of them, at least like their parents tell me, they still remember that tour, because for them it was not just a tour or a lecture, it was an experience. So if you use a video game to turn a class assignment into a learning experience, which is also going to be fun, thing is that's one of the best things that you can do.
Yeah, and on kind of the other side of that, so if we don't use a video game for educational purposes, I know that there are other ways and it like completely not involving the education system, but there are definitely ways you can get into and recognize sort of the impact of, the classics of archaeology, of the ancient world, just sort of on our everyday life, right? I mean, how many, people or instances do you encounter where they may just kind of off the top of their head know something, Greek, some, whether it's a saying or do you meet people who come to Greece, take a tour, and they just kind of know random things, and you're like, oh, well, obviously that's just cultural.
Well, first of all, there are people who say ancient Greek architecture, and they say, okay, I have seen something similar back home, because Greek architecture has influenced the architecture of the 1800s and the early 1900s a lot. Sometimes, you're talking about the Trojan War, and you say around, and of course you have to talk about the Trojan horse, and then someone who has never studied Homer tells you, okay, Trojan horse is the thing, is the malware that gets into your computer. Something that is completely irrelevant with Homer, but the word Trojan horse, it is used there. Or again, as an example taken from Homer, people who go out jogging and they say, okay, my Achilles tendon or my Achilles heel is killing me. So which is related to Homer and Achilles and his only weakness. So even or when you read about military technology, and you read the names of weapon systems, and they have a lot of they're Greek mythology references. So yeah, there are a lot of people who are using ideas and words that originate from ancient Greek mythology. Maybe they don't know about it, and they're very surprised that okay, that's where that comes from.
Yeah, and I was sitting here thinking, kind of, as a little girl, I didn't have the benefit of having, the beautiful sort of gaming atmosphere, or a lot of the books that were written, like the Percy Jackson books, that really would have, I loved them when I read them in high school, or I think I started them in 8th grade and then read them into high school. But, I was already by then, an 8th grader. So I didn't get to like really grow up with them in the sense that, I grew up with the Harry Potter books. But I was just thinking, for little kids, maybe getting them into mythology or just getting them familiar with some of the players. I was just sort of looking over at my shelf, and people won't be able to see it, but I have a little Playmobil Roman soldier, and I've had him ever since I was probably about 4 or 5. He was a gift, and I was just sort of thinking, I didn't know anything about the Romans. I didn't know about legionaries. I didn't know anything, but here he is, painted. He has a little shield and sword and his cute little helmet. And I realized, I've either played with him or he's just kind of been here in my room my whole life. And just loving his little costume. I was like, oh, I want to learn more about what that is. So I was realizing, there's so many different, Legos. You have the Lego figurines, and you can build the Lego, ancient sites. Those are fantastic learning tools, or just engaging tools for kids. I was kind of realizing, don't Playmobil now have like a whole series on
yes,
mythology?
Playmobil has an entire line. It's in their history line, and it's related to ancient Greek mythology. They have all the gods. They have sets related to the Odyssey. They have a set about the labors of Heracles, and they have a set. And again, people are not going to see that, but it's a set about Icarus and Daedalus.
Oh, with the wings.
And the set also comes, with wax and feathers and all that. And although, to be honest, most of the people I know who take those sets and play with them and also do a lot of custom the customizers that are in their 40s, but I have used my collection of Playmobiles as a tool in my tours on the Acropolis, and I could see the huge difference. So in front of the olive tree, next to the Archaeon. So instead of just telling them, this is the place where Athena stood and this is the place where Poseidon stood, I took out my Poseidon and my Athena figurines, and I played, or actually I played the myth with the Playmobil, and the kids were really interested in that, because for them it became not a story that a grown-up is telling them, but it became a game that they can play. And they can create their own version of the myth. They can tell the myth in their own way. They can process the myth with their means. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's so funny how just thinking about all these, references, these things, these educational tools we have, and, I think a lot of people who, didn't study the classics or who are young and they're still deciding, I think a lot of people tend to look at this, all these things and say, oh, well, that's really cool. That's a fun game. I love these books. Those are cool, tchotchkes for my bookcase, whatever the case may be. But, a lot of that doesn't really transfer into actually going in and studying these things, so there is that kind of discrepancy with, oh yeah, I learned to love it, but it's not useful for me or whatever. And that kind of feeds into, if we don't want these fields to sort of just die off because people don't invest in them, I don't know what it's like in Greece. It may be similar there, it may not, but here we see a lot of very sad efforts to defund our humanities programs. So I was very much shaped and impacted by, in my senior year at the University of Missouri, our department, essentially, it was already really small. The art history department was very small, and they said, all right, well, we're losing funding, so we're just going to smack your departments together and roll you into a whole new thing and kind of hide you away over here. Good luck. And so I was, very affected by that. So, we've just now had a great discussion about how much of Greek culture just kind of affects so many different areas of life. So knowing what we do, what you do, and having covered some of it, can a background in classics and archaeology, in just knowing your Greek mythology, can that come in useful for other fields, other professions? It doesn't have to just be you major in this, then you go into the field.
Look, I think that there are some that they do, and it may sound strange that I'm saying that. If you study classics, you can apply them to fields that are sometimes completely or seemingly irrelevant. So, for example, you can be an educator, not just when you do English language, but when you teach other subjects. But having studied the classics, it can help you become a much better teacher. Because also a lot of the ideas, in the sciences originate in one way or another from the ancient Greeks. Also, if you are in public relations, knowing your classics can be a tremendous help. If you're a lawyer, you can become a better orator and public speaker if you have a good grounding on the classics. I have read Demosthenes and Lysias and the ancient Greek forensic speeches. So I think that for a lot of professions, I wouldn't say that it is necessary, but it will make a huge difference, and you'll become a more successful professional if you have also studied classics.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, in Greece, obviously, just Greece kind of as a whole has sort of been struggling for a while now,
Oh yeah.
financially. But, is there kind of a concerted effort to get people into, either archaeology or the classics,
Uh,
or are they also sort of pushing people into, oh, well, you should study something else, urban planning
yeah.
or, science?
And unfortunately, in Greece, despite the fact that we have all that rich history and we have all those thousands of archaeological sites and millions of artifacts that someone has to take care of and protect them and preserve them and protect them. The Ministry of Culture is always underfunded, and the Ministry of Culture was always is hiring small numbers of archaeologists. And Up to date is the only authority that can hire archaeologists. Even if you work in a private project, you are paid by the constructor, but officially you're hired through the Ministry of Culture. So you cannot create your own consultancy as it happens in other countries, for example, as in New Zealand or Australia or in the United Kingdom. So if you want to work as an archaeologist, you have to do it through the Greek Ministry of Culture, or if you're extremely lucky, and of course you have the necessary qualifications, you can work in a university or in one of the foreign schools or in an archaeological project. The problem is that when it comes to the public universities, because of the financial crisis, the Greek government has started cutting funding towards the universities, and they're asking the universities to come up with their own means of funding. And I think there is a tendency of pushing people to studies and departments that could be where they would have a better more chances of getting employment in the future. We are still at the beginning of that process in Greece, but I'm afraid it will start affecting in the midterm the study of classics in this country also. Because up to now, since you don't have to pay any tuition, you go to university, you study for 4 or 5 years. But if the government changed that system and said that from now on, for a university to get funding, they must prove that it's an efficient university, and it's turning out a lot of students and professionals who can be employed in other fields or other sectors of the economy. So you will see that fewer and fewer students would like to go to study archaeology, and they would go to study computer sciences or economics, marketing, or things or whatever. I don't know. So yes, I'm afraid that is starting to happen in Greece also.
Oh, that's such a shame. And, in Greece, do you find that, even if that's sort of a modern shift away from the importance of, oh, you should totally go and study archaeology or classics, maybe in some of the slightly older generations who are already, or have been in the workforce for a while, do you find that there are maybe those with backgrounds in history or the classics, because there are some, professional areas that tend to have more of us than others. So, I know, politics is a really big one. I could be considered a walking cliche, right? A classics major going into politics. So, are there anyone maybe in the Greek government who have this background?
In the Greek government, well, the Minister of Culture, the current Minister of Culture, who's an archaeologist herself. But you know what? Most of the Greek politicians are either lawyers, and of course, to get in law school, you had to go through the exams. You were learning more ancient Greek and Latin and history. So yes, they are people who have studied law. They're supposed to know some of the classics, and even if it's restricted only in ancient Greek legal and issues and law. And that. Well, there are other politicians who are doctors or civil engineers, and I don't know what's their knowledge of the classics. However, in Greece, on every level of the public education, we get classes on history and sometimes also classes on archaeology. So everybody has some modicum of knowledge on ancient Greek, and I don't want to. Okay, we're talking about ancient Greek, but on all periods of Greek history, but especially in ancient Greek. So if you were talking about the Battle of Salamis, well, I wouldn't say everybody, but the majority of the Greek people will know what happened there. Maybe they don't know all the details, but they are aware of the history, and they know what is the Acropolis and what is that of the other. Maybe some of them have some strange ideas about Greek history, especially when it's related to their current political affiliation and beliefs. But at least they have the knowledge of ancient Greek history.
Yeah, I mean, and I was, just curious to ask only because, when we over here think of Greece, we just think, oh, the cradle of modern democracy, they're so smart, so they must have government kind of at least, philosophically figured out because of that great, heritage that, most Greeks, they just love talking about, oh, I'm Greek, my heritage, look I come from this great country full of ancient, smart people. So, I just, I was kind of always wondering. I was like, oh, well, do they actually use that in their own government?
They use well, I'm going to be candid and blunt. They use ancient Greece and the history sometimes as a rhetoric device. Sometimes they use it in the sense that, our great culture and our archaeological sites and what a great resource it is. And then when it comes to take decisions about constructing pipelines and expressways and wind turbines, for some reason they just forget about the greatness of ancient Greece and how important it is to protect those sites. And we may, for example, this year we will be celebrating the 2,500 years from the Battle of Thermopylae and the Battle of Salamis. And the government, who has organized a committee, has created a committee to organize those celebrations, has given permission to construct or to repair a naval repair facility in the general area of the location where the Battle of Salamis took place. So personally, as an archaeologist, I find that that kind of behavior is a little inconsistent, because either you admire and you respect your past, and your heritage, and you protect it, or you don't. And what I say, but now I'm becoming extremely political and partisan about it, say that yes, they're on the one hand, they're a little ambivalent. On one hand, yes, they admire ancient Greece and they're saying, this is the cradle of democracy and the cradle of civilization. They may refer to the Muses, and at the same time, they destroy the landscape where the ancient Greeks believed that the Muses were active. So yeah, I find that kind of behavior a little strange, to use a mild expression.
Yeah, I think that's both interesting and very sad, because it's you're actively trying to talk about this great past, this great heritage, and at the same time still advance your modern projects. So yeah. It honestly sort of seems like it's just kind of like a facade, right? You kind of hide behind the excuse and then you still do whatever you want. That's yeah. It's really interesting, and I love learning about what different countries are up to and what they're doing, and how they interact with the past. So, but anyway, yeah. So At the end of each podcast, I ask each guest if they would read the poem Ozymandias. And so the time has come. So now if you would please read the poem, I'd love to just sort of get
Yeah.
into, your thoughts on on the meaning of the poem and kind of, just anything you've got.
Okay. But you'll excuse me. I was never good at reading poetry. So I met a traveler from an antique land who said, two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk, a saturned visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that the sculptor well those passions read which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things. The hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal, these words appear. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away.
Fantastic. Great. So, this is a really famous poem. It was, written in 1818 by Percy Shelley. It's probably my favorite poem of all time. And, I find that it evokes such strong imagery, and so for you, having read this, what is it sort of, what messages can we take from it?
Well, maybe I'm a little biased because as an archaeologist, I have images like that in my mind, especially not only from Egypt, but also from Greece, but this is Egypt related. And also I know who Ozymandias was. But I will focus on two things. First of all, that the image of the wrecked statue, one had just the trunkless legs and a face. And on the other, that barren desert landscape that's around it. And on one hand, you have that the pretensions to majesty and greatness. Yes, look at my works, you're mighty, and despair. So you have the self-image of a king who thinks that he has conquered the world, he has created things that can stand the test of time. And centuries or thousands of years later, all his achievements have been lost. They have sunk into those deserts. They have sunk into the deserts of time. And the only thing that remains is that his words on the pedestal and his own ideas about himself. And the traveler who's describing that story says, okay, I have seen that statue and I have read those words and look around and there is nothing. There's just a desert. So yeah, I would think that, I don't know exactly what Shelley wanted to pass on with that poem, but say that how sometimes vain is the pursuit of creating, of conquering and creating huge things, and because in the end, time will overcome them and destroy them. And of course, I know that Ozymandias was actually Ramses II, who was an Egyptian pharaoh, and who's considered one of the great pharaohs. But he also had, say, I don't know if he was the first to do that in human history, but he had that sense of how to present myself, how to create my self-image. And he fought against the Hittites at the Battle of Kadesh, and there is an account of the battle. And we know from other sources that the battle was actually a tie between the Egyptians and the Hittites. But when you read the account of the battle and the description, you see that it was an Egyptian triumph, and all that was achieved because of him. Because alone, he defeated all the enemies and he rescued his troops. And we also know that Ramses was appropriating monuments of other pharaohs. He was writing his name, his cartoons on their monuments. So he had, I don't know, maybe he had that complex to prove that he was the greatest pharaoh of Egypt. And that, of course, is shown in the poem. First of all, the size of the statue, the ideas that are transmitted through the message. And in the end, all his achievements came to nothing because, well, no one remembered them. And the only thing that remained was actually the statue, which was created by a sculptor, and the inscription was written by a scribe. And I don't know, maybe if Shelley wants to say that, because he's using the word, the hand that mocks. So I don't know if he thinks that the artist is mocking his patron by creating the statue. I don't know, but yeah, I think that that's the idea, the main message of that poem. At least that's how
I think it's spot on. And I kind of, maybe rightly or wrongly, because I'm no English major, I don't I don't study that, but I think that the mark of a good poem, of an excellent poem, is one that can stand the test of time, that would be applicable in any age at any time. And obviously this was thousands of years ago. Ramesses was the pharaoh, and at least 11, 12, 100 BCE or whatever. And but I can think of a lot of different world leaders at any time throughout history who this could have equally is applied to them. The first example in my mind was Augustus. He was so dead set on I will leave Rome a city of marble, and I'm going to be remembered as the greatest princeps ever, and blah blah blah. And I'm like, well, he also he's gone too. So I mean, yes, we have a bunch of his statues and stuff, but he's not building these statues, so he had to have someone who, obviously he had to be able to order it, to tell it, and that's kind of why we remember him. Or, we had people to write down his achievements, or else, we wouldn't know about them either. So, yeah, I love how it's applicable to any leader, anytime. And even now, there's so many modern leaders now who are kind of obsessed with their image, and with, I'm going to make my country the best one ever for the new Roman Empire. And again, you can't do it alone. It's kind of a group effort. So
and maybe it's not only applicable to individuals, maybe applicable to entire cultures. Because you have cultures who think, and people who think, okay, we have built those great irrigation canals, and we can bring water to the desert, and our achievement will last forever. And look how the great pyramids that we have built, and we have conquered, we have reclaimed land out of the jungle, and we can build our pyramids and monuments and all that. And after a few generations, their culture is gone. So maybe that message is more prevalent today, because we're, as a civilization, I mean, the global civilization, we're facing a huge crisis, or several smaller crises, which can become a huge crisis. So we always have to be aware that, okay, maybe that will sound a little pessimistic, but nothing really lasts forever, and you have to be very careful not to repeat the mistakes of previous cultures if we want our culture, our technology, our way of life, our societies to keep evolving and being and developing, instead of going back to a new dark age. And we have issues with climate change. We have issues with wars all around the world. These are things that have happened in the past, and through the study of history, we can learn about them. And we have now the opportunity, because we can look back through all these generations, through those cultures, and how they dealt with those issues, and these are the mistakes, or sometimes the good things they did, to apply them to our own predicaments and to our own problems before it's too late. So I think that poems like these are very relevant, not just for single politicians, but for an entire culture.
Yeah, I think I think that's an amazing point to end this on. I mean, that how do you top that? It's, kind of almost like a memento mori for for civilizations and individuals. So I couldn't have put it a better way to end it. So I wanted to thank you for agreeing to be on the podcast, even from Greece. I know that the time change is kind of difficult to plan around, so I was very excited that we were able to make this work. And
thank you for inviting me and having me, and it was a great discussion talking about archaeology, history, Playmobil, and video games.
Yeah, all wonderful things that I love, you love, that hopefully other people love to talk about and think about and do as well. So yeah, and I hope that once COVID is over, I'll be able to come to Greece. I hope that other people listening may want to either go back or visit for the first time. And if anyone listening wants to find a fantastic tour guide when they're in Greece, check out Aristotle. He's one of the best. Just to quickly finish, you have a blog, right?
Yes, it's both in Greek and English. The title is Aristotle Guide in Greece.
Fantastic. So yes, people can find you. I'm assuming all your contact info is on.
Yes, it's on my blog. Yeah, they can also find me through TripAdvisor if they want. So if they want to book me as a guide, they can find me both through my blog and also through on TripAdvisor. But if they want to read posts about the archaeology of Greece, they can check out my blog.
Fantastic. Great. And so I will hopefully speak to you soon.
Trireme Transit is now departing ancient Odyssey. Next stop is Present Ponderings. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things. The hand that mocked them, and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear: My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away.